City of Stevens Point Finance Committee meeting, recorded September 8, 2025.
Okay, I'll call a meeting of the Finance Committee to order at 6:41. Could we have the roll taken, please?
Christensen.
Here?
Morrow.
Here.
Shuda.
Here.
Keemer. Here. Broderick. Here.
Okay, we definitely have a quorum. We have 3 items on our non-action items. First one was our roll call. Second one will be a presentation of our proposed 2026 capital budget. Comptroller Treasurer Laddick.
All right, thank you. So, and Marcy, if you want to hit the next slide right away. So this is our annual capital budget presentation. First of all, so September Finance is just our initial presentation. It's a chance to ask any initial questions.
So the button you showed me isn't the button.
It's not working? Okay.
Oh, here we go. Does that work? There.
Okay.
Different button.
Different button. Okay. All right. Usually the mayor runs the slides, so learning curve. So anyway, September Finance is our initial presentation, chance to ask any initial questions, express any initial concerns. We're not looking for formal action tonight. For October Finance and October Council, we are looking for formal action, both at Finance Committee and Council. And if you want to make any amendments, that would be the time to do so, would be the October round of meetings. And then after October Council, we typically would like to move forward with projects in terms of ordering, potentially vehicles or equipment, moving forward with design, that sort of thing. So hopefully after October, we are set to go with the capital budget. First of all, what determines the size of our capital budget, or what's supposed to determine the size of our capital budget? So we've got the amount of debt principal that we are repaying, which makes room for new borrowing. Now, we have had to deviate from this limit over the past few years due to just the cost of everything going up and rapid inflation in the cost of capital projects, but we do have a long-term plan to bring that back into balance. Also, I'll note that we will further deviate from this concept for 2026, based on the large projects that we have, specifically City Hall and Business 51, just wouldn't be possible to tie our new borrowing to what we're repaying in principal for 2026. So, and then plus we look at the amount of fund balance or savings that we're utilizing. The goal is to keep fund balance stable, and basically the source of fund balance is from previous budget years. We budget monies and not every single line item gets spent every year, which is a good thing. So we have a little bit of money left over, and what we do with that money is we put it toward the capital budget, and then plus sometimes we have other sources of funding. Over the past few years, earlier in the decade, we had ARPA stimulus funding. We had some TIF repayments that also helped, but we've spent all of our stimulus funding and we don't really have any TIF repayments. All of our TIF districts are pretty square right now, so that's not really a source anymore. And of course, the goal is always financial sustainability when we're looking at our overall capital planning in terms of trying to balance where our debt is, the condition of our infrastructure, the condition of our capital assets, and meeting the needs of our community. So, how do we measure the size of the capital budget? This year it's really complicated because of the large projects of City Hall and Business 51. So one of the things that we tried to do is we tried to keep the size of the regular or routine capital budget down to partially offset these large projects. So the amounts in each category, and I organize this a couple of different ways in terms of how we can measure the size of the capital budget, but basically we have about $5.2 million in regular capital projects. That includes $3 million in road projects, which we discussed. We have $9 million for the 2026 portion of City Hall expenses, and then we have non-TIF Business 51 expenses of just under $2.3 million. So most of the TIF projects for 2026 fall within TIF districts. However, there are portions that do not fall with any TIF district, so that is going to have to be on the general borrowing or general tax levy supported borrowing rather than those TIF districts. So For total tax levy supported projects, you're looking at about $16.5 million. And then of that amount, tax levy supported borrowing would be about $15.6 million. And then we're projecting $900,000 in fund balance usage. For comparison's sake, last year we used $695,000 in fund balance, but we did have a good year in 2024, so we're able to up that amount that we use in fund balance for 2026. So, and I know some people are more visual as opposed to just looking at a list of numbers, so I wanted to add some graphs to kind of help people visualize this. So this is basically the numbers that I just showed you, just in a pie chart form, so you can see the proportion of the tax levy supported projects. You can see that the vast majority of that is for the new city hall, and then you have some for the non-TIF Business 51 and the regular capital projects. Also, a graph of fund balance use in the capital budget. So this is varied based on financial performance between about $700,000 and $1.1 million. Proposing to use $900,000 for 2026 puts that right about in the middle. So you can see it's increasing from the amount that we had used for the 2025 capital budget. Okay, and then continuing to talk about the amounts. So we already talked about we have $16.5 million in tax levy supported projects. We also have projects that are not supported by the general tax levy. That would include $7.4 million for Business 51 TIF borrowing, and that would be for the North Side project. We've got about $3.8 million in Business 51 TIF funds on hand. So we do have some TIF funds on hand that we can use to fund the Business 51 portions that are in TIF districts. We have a $3.5 million Business 51 grant, and then we've got a little bit over $400,000 that's I call miscellaneous, funded by other sources. Mainly those are other grant dollars. So the total capital budget is $31,731,111. That is a lot larger than usual. That's actually rivals the size of our operating budget. Might actually end up being a little bit bigger than our operating budget. So we're definitely planning on doing a lot of stuff next year, and of course with two major projects, that really increases the size of the capital budget. Also, total borrowing, thought you might want to know that number, about $23 million in total borrowing, and also total Business 51, if we include everything, grant, TIF funds, capital funds, you're looking at a little over $17 million for 2026. So this is basically just, again, graphing out the numbers that I just went through in terms of the various components and where they all fall. So you can see that Business 51 is a little bit over half of that total capital budget of $31 million. Then you see also a very large portion for City Hall, for the $9 million for City Hall, and then a smaller portion for the regular capital projects, and very small miscellaneous funded by other sources, which, like I said, is mainly grant funding for other things. So, okay, and then also wanted to analyze the borrowing components. I know, since I know that's can be a hot issue in terms of what's really driving our borrowing for the year. So basically, I applied the $900,000 in fund balance to the tax levy supported projects. So that gets us to about $4.3 million for tax levy supported projects. Again, we have $9 million for City Hall, all of which we'll have to borrow. We've got the almost $2.3 million for non-TIF Business 51 expenses, and then $7.4 million for Business 51 TIF borrowing, for a total borrowing of $23 million. And again, graph that out for you so that you can see or kind of visualize those numbers. So one of the items that I'd like to discuss with the committee is, 2026 obviously will be a large year for borrowing. So for reference, in 2024, we borrowed just under $16 million. For 2025, we're looking at borrowing about $9.7 million. And then for 2026, you see that jumping up a lot at that $23 million mark. So a possible solution to smooth this out a little bit is to increase the 2025 borrow for some of those 2026 projects toward the end of 2025. And basically what we would be doing then is we would be evening out the years a little bit. So we would be borrowing more like $15 to $16 million for 2025, and then more in the neighborhood of $17 to $18 million in 2026. And if we go to the next slide, couple of points on this, and I apologize for all the text, but some of this got kind of complicated and I felt like I just had to kind of write it out. It didn't lend itself well to bullet points, but basically a smoother rise in outstanding debt will attract less attention from our bond rating agency, Moody's. Also, we typically borrow toward the end of the year and reimburse ourselves for what we spent on capital projects. So now if we're looking at a year where we're going to spend $31 million in capital projects, that's going to be a really big drain on our cash. So if we don't borrow more in 2025, we'll need to borrow earlier in 2026 because we won't have the cash to advance for such large projects. That's not the end of the world. I wouldn't say that this is an absolute must-do, but the issue that you have is what if unexpected needs come up? So what if we do the borrowing in March, we borrow for everything in advance, and then in July, some unexpected need comes up? Well, right now, because we borrow toward the end of the year, we can always adjust that total borrowing amount for the year and say, okay, we're going to borrow an extra $200,000 to meet this unexpected need. If we borrow earlier, we're kind of locked in. We can't really do that without doing another borrowing, and each time we borrow money, it does cost us money just for the issuance costs. The other point is, while short-term interest rates are currently expected to go down, our borrowing is based more on long-term interest rates, which go up and down similar to the stock market. So having more level borrowing amounts smooths out this interest rate risk. Realistically, we don't know where long-term interest rates are going, so having the borrowing be a little bit more even just gives us less interest rate risk, that in case interest rates reverse course and start going up, we're not borrowing a huge amount of money all at one interest rate. Okay, so the capital budget size versus request. This is something that I like to show you every year. So first of all, you can see how our 2026 capital budget is larger than previous years. In 2024, we were just under 10 million. 2025, we were just under 9.3 million. For this 2026 capital budget, based on just what's supported by the general tax levy and fund balance, you're looking at about $16.5 million. So it definitely is higher than previous years. Also, you'll see that we had initial requests of $18,757,000, and then we updated that to about $16.5 million. So we cut out about $2.2 million in requests as far as requests for 2026 that didn't get funded. And you can note that then you see the 2027 requests going up. That's because $1,679,000 got basically moved from 2026 requests into 2027. So that's something that I always like to point out, that we can push things off, but then it does affect your future years. So definitely something to keep an eye on. So, and then this is just graphing out the requested versus recommended, so you can kind of see how that functions, where we brought that number down for 2026, but then that increased the amount that we have scheduled for 2027. So, and then reading the capital sheet, I'm not going to read this whole list to you because I think we're probably familiar with the capital sheet, but one thing I did want to note is that we did add a couple of things this year. We added the line number. It's a new column this year for easier reference of where things are at. So I know sometimes when we're referring to the capital sheet, it can be kind of difficult to say, well, it's this thing here, and it's, just under this, and so adding a line number we thought would make it a little bit easier to reference if we're looking at the capital sheet. And then if we can go to the next slide, the other category that we added was future funded by other sources. So that basically shows how much future projects for 2027 to 2030 are expected to be funded by other sources, so that you can look at those 27, 28, 29, or 30 projects and get an idea of how much of that is actual city general capital project funding and how much of that is funded by other sources such as grants or TIF district funding or utility funding, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so that was kind of the introduction. Now getting into the actual 2026 capital projects. So for the city clerk, we've got $75,300 for Badger books. That was already approved during the July round of meetings. Also $6,500 for a scanner. Note that it is a high capacity scanner, so it's not like your typical desktop scanner. This is something that can scan huge volumes of documents all at once. That works more like a photocopier type speed. So that's why it's more expensive than what you would see for a typical scanner. Getting into the comptroller treasurer, and this is actually the next line, our next agenda item. We're going to talk about this, $9,500 for a financial management plan. We'll discuss that a little bit more with the next agenda item as far as what we would potentially want to see out of that. Citywide, we already talked about the $9 million. That's the 2026 expected expenses for construction of a new city hall. And then just in case you're curious as far as what the other years look like, so 2025 yet this year, we're looking to spend about $986,000 for the initial design, the demo of the existing building, and abatement of the existing building. And then for 2027, to finish up the project, we're looking at about $7.4 million. So that basically will get you to that total estimate of about $17 million for City Hall. And then also $50,000 for citywide building maintenance. That's an annual item, so in case unexpected things come up, somebody's furnace dies, we find a hole in a roof, somebody's air conditioner dies, we have this $50,000 that we can rely on in order to fund those emergency type repairs that come up throughout the city. Then getting into information technology, $200,000 to update network infrastructure, $50,000 for computer lifecycle replacements, basically to replace existing computers, $47,000 for the main PD server hardware, and $25,000 for Windows server upgrades. Airport. So the nice thing about airport is that these projects are all 95% grant funded and 5% local share funded. So the amounts that you see there are just the 5% local share. And then if you look on the capital sheet, you'll see the funded by other sources, which shows those 95% grant amounts. So and basically it's mainly projects related to design for runway rehab, lighting, and new signage for some improvements at the airport. And Department of Public Works street projects. So we have $2,150,000 for the Michigan Avenue underpass. This will be both to improve the road surface and also to fix some of the drainage issues that are underneath that road surface that are causing the road surface to buckle like it is with the freeze thaw cycle because we've got a defective drainage system down there. One thing that I do want to note is, and I did talk to Director Badoon and Director Lemke, this should help the situation with flooding at the Michigan Avenue underpass, but we are making no guarantee that this will completely fix the problem at the Michigan Avenue underpass. So it may still flood in the event of a heavy rain. So I just want to make sure that we have that expectation, clear that it's not going to completely fix the problem there. Also, budgeting $700,000 for road surface improvements, such as chip sealing or seal coating and resurfacing. That's an annual item that we typically budget for road improvements. And then $150,000 in traffic signal improvements. When you add all three of those together, that equals $3 million for the non-Business 51 road projects, which is in line with the target that the Finance Committee and City Council set for how much we anticipate to spend on road projects during the Business 51 years. Okay, getting into the Department of Public Works Business 51. So I listed this by the amount of general capital project funds, tax levy supported project funds that are being spent on Business 51. So we've got $1.1 million for the Business 51 North Side construction. That's the 10% of that project that is outside of a TIF district. The total project is $11 million. You also have 90% or $9.9 million that's TIF funded. Of that amount, we've got about $2.5 million in TIF funds on hand that we can use, so we don't have to borrow for that, but we do have $7.4 million that we anticipate borrowing for. We also have $750,000 for the South Segment Phase 2 real estate acquisition and utilities, and then for the South Segment Phase 1 construction, the tax levy supported part of that contribution is $437,500. The total project is actually $5.3 million, but we've got a little bit over $3.5 million in our grant. It's an STP urban grant, and then about $1.3 million in TIF funds on hand. I would like to note that for those TIF funds, they're not in TIF District 12, which is where the project is. Those funds are currently in TIF District 9. We'll have to do a transfer from TIF District 9 to TIF District 12 to transfer those funds so that TIF District 12 has the money to use for that project. And then I always like to look at our road construction budgets, the history. So this is from 2019 to 2026. You can see as far as the tax levy supported portion, we're pretty much in line with where we've been in previous years, which is just over $5 million. And then if you look at all road projects, so Business 51 plus the other $3 million that we're doing, that total is a little over $20 million. So certainly accomplishing a lot for road projects next year. Primarily it's Business 51. Okay, then fleet vehicles and equipment. We've got $300,000 for street sweepers for Department of Public Works. We've got $226,000 for a garbage truck for the Parks Department. $165,000 for engineering trucks in the Department of Public Works. There's 3 of them. $120,000 for hybrid police squads. $115,000 for a 1-ton flatbed truck for the Department of Public Works, $100,000 for vehicle lifts for the Department of Public Works. This is what the mechanics use when they're lifting up a vehicle to work on underneath it. $80,000 for police chief squads, $70,000 for a mower 4x4 and attachments for the Parks Department, $25,000 for a 3-wheeler for Parks, and $14,000 for a Harley rake for Parks. I know a lot of people don't know what a Harley rake is. That's a mechanical device that the Parks Department uses, I believe mainly to even out the parking lot and do some other things. Yeah, okay, mainly parking lots and driveways to smooth things out. So, and then the fire department, we've got $100,000 for radio replacements. This is year 2 of a 4-year plan. So the plan was to spend $100,000 a year over 4 years to get the radios in the fire department replaced. We've got $37,500 for turnout gear, which is the protective gear that the firefighters wear to protect themselves when they're going into a fire. $27,500 for general fire equipment. $27,130 for Station 1 basement repairs. Right now they're having an issue with the basement flooding, so this would be to seal the basement and make some repairs to the basement to prevent future flooding. $22,500 for technical rescue equipment and $8,000 for a new software for the fire department. And then Parks Department, we've got $76,000 for the Plover River Crossing project design. This one, again, was already approved on July 15th, 2024. $40,000 for Gerke Park to retrofit the west bleachers with safety barriers. $25,000 for Iverson Park to tuck point the bridge on the east side of the Plover River, and $20,000 for the Piffner Park Piffner building tuck pointing and exterior brick replacement. And I don't know if everyone's familiar with the term tuck pointing, but it's basically fixing the masonry that you have with some of these brick or masonry type buildings. And then Police Department, we've got $110,000 for replacement of the carrier rooftop unit. That's part of their HVAC system. And $42,000 to demo, dispose, and replace some windows. They did originally request $100,000 to replace more windows, but this was scaled back to focus on the windows that are in the worst condition. And that is it for my presentation of 2026 capital projects. And with that, I would take any initial questions that anyone has or any initial thoughts that anyone has.
Alder Keemer.
Thank you, Chair. Could you say a little bit more about TIF borrowing? At first, I thought you meant transferring, borrowing TIF funds from another TIF, but it sounds like we're actually borrowing.
Yeah, we would actually be borrowing the money, so issuing debt, and then the repayment of that debt would come from the TIF district as opposed to coming from the general tax levy.
Okay.
So and I apologize.
It's okay.
I didn't.
I mean, are the interest rates similar? I mean,
the interest rates, if you're borrowing for a road project, the interest rates are similar. And basically what we would do is we would do one borrowing, and then we would say, okay, a portion of this is the responsibility of this TIF district, and sometimes we have multiple TIF districts. Sometimes it's, okay, so much is TIF District 5, so much is TIF District 11, so much is this TIF district, and then so much is our general tax levy. And then we actually divide that up in terms of, okay, how much each has as far as a portion of the payments to keep that all square when we issue that debt and we do those borrowings. But yeah, it's actually issuing debt. It's not borrowing from one TIF district to another.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else on the committee?
Will we be getting a description or to explain a $2.1 million repair project that may not work?
So I think the best that I can do for that is if Director Badoon and Director Lemke could speak a little bit more to the Michigan Avenue project, and if I can, I'll page them from the overflow room, and I'm sure that they'll show up shortly. But basically, my understanding is it's not necessarily that it won't work, it's that it won't necessarily fix all the problems, but I'll let Director Lemke explain a little
It
better.
won't handle that 100-year storm, probably, that we get every 10 years now.
So the Michigan Avenue Underpass project really isn't like a flood mitigation project. I mean, it's really the pavement, from our perspective, is damaged. If you've noticed, earlier in the year until recently, a month or so ago, it was jetted again. Even during the dry weather, there was standing water. And really, that's what it is to address. The under-drain system that keeps it dry, since the road surface is actually below the normal groundwater level. So in order to keep it dry so we can actually use it, we need to keep the water off it. So we're draining the water, groundwater, as it comes in, keeping it dry. So the intent is to replace that so that the road can be used. You know, above and beyond that, we're going to try to make some improvements that would hopefully then sort of mitigate some of the flooding stuff. But this isn't a flood mitigation program. So when we're done, we anticipate that the road will operate without, dry weather flooding or indications. So we would have to do yet additional work to truly mitigate the flooding, like such as the pump station, which is not part of our current project, ensure that we have adequate capacity to that. We will be reevaluating just the storm frequencies, increasing our general storm size over what we would do for a normal project, just to ensure that we have enough inlet capacity, that we're getting the water off the road fast enough and capturing it. That's our first step towards alleviating flooding in the underpass. But there would be several projects yet that would have to be completed, to truly ensure what that is. Now, eventually we're still going to get there. Could we plan for a 100-year storm? Possibly so. Are we going to plan for a 500-year storm, which like they just recently had in Milwaukee? We're probably not. So I would never, ever give anyone a promise that it'll never flood when we're done, no matter what we do for it, because the good Lord will prove us wrong.
I can talk about that. So on the utility side of things, the condition of the road there really has a lot to do with the fact that we need to improve our ability to dewater that structure, right? We went through, as Scott mentioned, and jetted out. We have an underdrain system under the pavement in there, and it's old. And when we do maintenance on it now, we actually pull back pieces of the underdrain system. So it's falling apart under there. A couple more rounds and we could have things collapsing, and then we'd have no underdrain system, and then there'd be water standing on the road. And that would be really bad, because then no matter how much money you spend on a road, we're going to destroy it with the freeze-thaw cycle, right? So the utility portion, we're going to improve that underdrain system so water gets to the pump station efficiently and we can keep it well below the pavement. And then the flooding component of that underpass is kind of interesting. It really doesn't have anything to do with dewatering the groundwater. When we have a big enough event, it surcharges the storm sewer on Patch Street and backs up Patch Street and backs up that pipe into the underpass, which it's not designed to pump that and really never will be. But cleaning that pipe out, it was really, really full of sand. We've had far fewer flooding events in that underpass since. But that took, I think we took about 100 vac truck loads out of that pipe. It's a 42-inch pipe, it's big, and it was about half full of sand. So we're continuously making progress on limiting any closure of that underpass because of water, but it really has to do with the capacity of that storm pipe. So to Scott's point, an eventual upsizing of that, but we're talking decades to get a little more capacity in that pipe would help that. But it gets all the way up to 96-inch, I think, where it hits the river. So it's not a small effort.
Okay. Any other, Alder Schuda?
For perspective, when was the last time that project or some sort of project was done? Just to put it in perspective. I mean, the underpass, right? Whether it be road or drainage.
I don't remember.
So I haven't seen it. The most recent plans that we have for any work there is from the 80s. I do understand that there was pavement replaced sometime in the very early 2000s, I was told.
But I believe all the components of the underdrain system are original.
Yeah,
Okay, so
the underdrain is the
Laid out,
1980s
it's been a while.
edition,
Okay.
yes. The pavement is, like I said, 2000,
Yeah.
roughly, so.
Okay.
And so especially for concrete pavement, which should last, 40 to 60 years, that it's only lasted 20, is an indication that something else needs to be done to ensure that it does last a good long time.
Okay.
And so we'll definitely be changing material types and stuff to make sure we don't end up with a corroded pipe in a few years to get there as well, so.
Excellent.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, guys.
Any other questions? Alder Broderick,
Comments.
comment.
I guess firstly, since it hasn't been mentioned on the committee yet, I do think it definitely makes sense to balance out the borrowing by doing a little extra in '25, unless we have some reason to expect that long-term interest rates are going to plummet next year, which I don't think we do. That seems to be the natural choice. So feedback there, I think that's a good idea. I wanted to zero in on the IT portion of the budget a little bit. I see that the first priority there listed is for
Switches.
PD server hardware, which I see is going end of support this October. And so it seems to me like we should maybe consider perhaps taking away from some of that network infrastructure refresh amount, which is a much larger amount that didn't get reduced at all, to try and fully cover that expense, just because police department data, I think, sort of inherently does represent potentially some very sensitive information, and prioritizing that replacement and minimizing any security risk, I think is worth taking away from a longer life cycle refresh for the network infrastructure, if they're willing to consider that.
Sure, yeah. I'd want to run that by our IT director, and I know he's not here tonight, but I'll definitely pass that on to him, and we'll have we can have an answer for you either for council next week or, for sure before October, so.
Excellent, thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the committee? Any from the public?
Jackie Guthrie, Alder, District 2. Just a couple questions. I know that our focus right now is on the 2026 capital budget, but in scanning the years to come, there were a couple things missing, and I just wanted to see if I was overlooking them or sort of if they had fallen off. So one of them was a streets garage. I wonder if I'm losing it in all of those details or if it is accounted for in one of the coming years.
Okay, and I don't believe that a streets garage is on I don't believe it's currently in the current 5-year capital plan. So.
Sorry, this is awkward.
That's okay.
We're going to keep doing it, though. I also wanted to note that in the medium term, right, in the next few years, I see significant dollars related to keeping our, let's say, senior pool afloat. Some pretty significant repair and refresh, and I recognize that Director Kramer isn't here, but I know that I would appreciate hearing about starting a capital campaign, starting to plan the timing of a replacement for that pool before we all of a sudden have to make decisions in the hundreds of thousands of dollar range related to keeping the current pool working. So I'll just throw that out into the ether, and I see Todd nodding.
I think that's why he did the Gerke plan, is because all these things are coming and they have to be prioritized before it all goes up. That's why the plan was forth, and to kind of see where the priorities of the people were.
Yeah, so the Director of Forestry just indicated, for those who are listening online, that we have a Gerke plan in the works, so that, yes, once that's established, hopefully we can move towards making some decisions about the pool. I saw some really big numbers to maintain the current pool, and it kind of hits my gut a little bit to think about putting that, planning to put that kind of money in when I think we're all on the same page that we're looking at the end of that pool's life. And then finally on the Michigan Ave underpass, I think I understood from the directors that this is not this is a significant amount of money, but we shouldn't expect it to work perfectly. I didn't understand, though, if the pump was being replaced in the 2-point-something million or if the pump is not being replaced. I heard the under drainage system and the concrete, but my understanding of the pump and the amount of water it can displace is ineffective for our current rain events. Is the 2.1 million including replacing the pump?
No.
And the answer is no. A different question to ask Director Lemke might be, what would we have to spend on the Michigan Ave underpass to make it serviceable most years? Like a once in 5-year situation, sure, but multiple. It sounds like we're still looking at multiple closures per season, even with this replacement. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, one of the answers is we'll have to wait and see, because a lot of the maintenance we did on the pipe this year, which was the sand removal, which really decreased the capacity of the collection system that drains Patch Street. That is not the same pump we pump the water. That's not the same pipe we pump the water into. Once it gets down to the underpass, we pump that north of the tracks, and we've never had a surcharging issue there. So I believe our frequencies of the closures with current maintenance efforts, even with current pumps, with the upcoming project to increase the effectiveness of the underdrain system, I think all of that will result in far fewer closures. Then I think some of the projects we have to do to get it down to even less frequent deal with some collection system pipe sizing. We can actually upsize those pumps a bit yet. But the surge of water that we get when the storm sewer system overflows is one that you're not going to overcome with pumps that'll fit. So we can, if we made them 50% bigger, it'd be very minor detail because it's a short event when that happens. But it's getting a lot better. The upcoming project, of course, when we can keep the pavement dry underneath and the section of earth under the road dry, we won't have that heaving issue. So that's like the biggest step here for the road condition. Yeah.
Any other questions from the public? Comptroller, you want to keep going? Is there anything else that you want to bring to light?
Nothing else in terms of capital that I wanted to discuss, so I think if there's nothing else, we can move on to the next agenda item.
Item number 3 will be discussion on a proposal from Ehlers Incorporated for the creation of a financial management plan. And Comptroller, are you going to speak to that as well?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So basically, as I've noted, over a couple of meetings, I definitely anticipate that we're going to have some challenges in the future with the operating budget, just given where we are with net new construction, and given that net new construction numbers are lower than they have been in the past, and we don't see a lot of promise for that turning around, at least, in the near future. So the point of having a financial management plan is this is something that Ehlers is able to do, to put together a plan for where we're going with our operating budget, what we see as gaps in terms of maintaining, the current level of services in terms of, okay, for 2027, 2028, 2029, 2030, where do we expect to be with the operating budget? What deficits do we expect in the future? And then looking at possible solutions to try to address those. So I think we're going to have to make some difficult decisions in the future, but certainly having a plan of action on how to address those going forward, I think makes a lot of sense. And that's the biggest thing that I want to get out of this, is a good plan for where we're going with the operating budget and what we're going to do to address the operating budget challenges. The other aspect, if you read their proposal, the other aspect that they can look at is they can look at our debt and our borrowing and look at the future of where they expect us to go in terms of tax levy. I think based on the large capital projects that we have, that might be valuable as well. That's not as critical for me, just because, not that it isn't a critical issue, it certainly is, but I know that I've already analyzed that to an extent. I had the presentation back in May where we talked a lot about the amount of borrowing that we anticipate, some of the tax levy impacts, so I feel like that one we've already worked on to an extent, but I definitely feel like there's work to be done on the operating budget, and I think it could be good to just get a second set of eyes on where our overall financial picture is, and get a second set of eyes on where we're going, and I think both pieces of that could be beneficial, even though I already put some of the work into, analyzing debt capacity and so on and so forth. I think having a second set of eyes look at that, it's a big enough topic, I think, to justify that. But one of the reasons why I wanted to make sure I brought this to the Finance Committee, in advance of approval, is I want to make sure that what we get out of this is what you want to have come out of this, and that we're addressing any concerns that you have or anything that you want to see come out of this plan. I want to make sure that we're capturing anything, because we can still modify the scope of what we're doing.
I think with the earlier presentation, you did a good job of explaining your strategizing of try to maintaining our bond rating as positive as possible, and we are fortunate to have a positive bond rating. And I think if we're able to have a second set of eyes, like you mentioned, take a look at things, if we can just gain just a little bit of efficiency, I think for less than $10,000. I think that's a really good investment. So I for one think it'd be a very good idea. That's just my own thoughts. Committee?
Yeah, I think it's a very wise idea, and I think it's commendable that we haven't consulted this kind of financial planning up till now, so.
Okay. And that is not an action item, that's just a quick discussion, and there is the memo in the packet as well for additional information. That does get us to our discussion and possible action on some various items. Item number 4 is a claim from Danielle Morey, Comptroller.
Yes, so, and if you remember, she asked us to delay this last month. She did send me an email today and asked us to delay for another month. So I did inform her that we could delay for one more month. However, we are running into statutory deadlines with that one, so I did inform her that this is your last extension and we have to take this up in October in terms of considering her claim.
I appreciate you being mindful of those timelines because you get yourself in tough situations otherwise. So, all right, then that would bring us to item number 5, consideration of a claim from Hannah Ligman, tire damage due to a pothole on private property.
Yes, so in this one, usually I send liability claims to the insurance company. However, with this one, we've actually talked to the claimants on both of these and explained that actually this was not a city road, this is private property. So the recommendation is to deny because it's not even our property or our road. More of a formality. Once we told the claimants that, hey, this isn't our road, I think they were both amenable to, oh, okay, didn't realize, but we still want to go through the formal process since we did get a formal claim of denying the claim.
Motion to deny the claim.
Okay, we have a motion to deny by Alder Morrow. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Alder Keemer. Any other discussion?
I guess quick question.
Sure.
Is it, at that point, the claimants will reach out to the private property owner, or do we alert the private property owner? Like how, what's the...
It's really on the claimant
Okay.
to find the private property owner and pursue their claim with them.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor of denying that claim by Hannah Ligman would signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed would be no. So that claim is denied. Item number 6, consideration of the claim, Fatema Khan-Tire damage due to a pothole on private property. Sounds familiar. Comptroller?
Yes, and a very similar situation, and I think actually similar location, but again, claim was related to a pothole that's on private property, not on city property, so the recommendation is to deny.
Motion to deny the claim.
Motion to deny by Alder Morrow. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Alder Broderick. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll take our vote. All in favor of denying that claim would signify by saying aye.
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 Aye, and opposed would be no. That claim is also denied. Item number 7, approval of contracts with Stantec for the Brownfield cleanup grant and the community-wide assessment grant.
So this would be Director Kivala.
Director Kivala.
Hello. Thank you again. So, as you guys may remember, last year we applied for an EPA Brownfields grant and did not receive it. After reviewing that application with a variety of entities to see where we went wrong, staff feels now that we have a very, very good shot at it this year. So we're looking to reapply. The Brownfields grant would be seeking to assist us in the redevelopment of the Shopko site. So obviously anything redoing the roads, development, et cetera, the park space, transit, all of that will require some sort of cleanup depending on how much soil we're disturbing. So this grant is meant to assist with that. The request here would be to approve a contract with Stantec, who we worked with last year and who we continue to consult with on a lot of our environmental work, to assist us with the EPA Brownfield grant and the community-wide assessment grant. So having them on, excuse me, having them on board really assists staff to bring a level of expertise that we feel will be beneficial in us getting the grant, administering the grant, et cetera. Without them, it would put a lot of strain on staff, I think, as well as decrease our chances at ultimately receiving the grant. So again, when we're looking to get a multi-million-dollar grant, it's okay to ask for help. So
wasn't that just shy of $5 million?
The original ask last year was just shy of $5 million. Yeah.
So I think it's...
And we did not have this assistance last year.
We had the assistance to a lesser extent. So they did assist us. We did a lot of the grant writing ourselves. They more consulted and offered just advice in the end. So this would be more of an upfront assistance ask.
Okay. Committee, what are your wishes?
I would move approval of the contract with Stantec.
Okay. We have a motion to approve by Elder Kiemer and a second by Elder Morrow. Any other questions or comments from the committee? Any from the public?
Wish them good luck.
Yeah. All right. Hearing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor of that contract with Stantec would signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed would be no. And that is approved. Item number, got to scroll down. Item number 8 is the approval of adjusting the fees for the purchase of garbage and recycling carts, as well as the fee for upgrading a garbage cart. Who would like to present on that?
Well, I don't see Director Badoon here, but I can kind of summarize it in his absence. So basically, right now, you can purchase a new garbage cart if, something happens to your current garbage cart and you need to get it replaced. You can purchase, or sometimes you can purchase an additional cart, and right now we're charging $70 for a 95-gallon cart. However, our actual cost to buy the carts has increased to $82. So the Department of Public Works is proposing increasing the cart fee from $70 to $90. And the point there is just to cover our costs, since it doesn't make sense for us to be selling carts for less than what it actually costs us to purchase them. And then also, if you have a smaller cart, you're able to upgrade that cart and trade it in for a larger cart. Currently, the fee for that is $15, and they're looking to increase that to $25. And again, that's to cover the costs of the larger carts.
Okay.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve by Elder Morrow. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Elder Kiemer. Questions, comments from the committee?
Kind of self-explanatory there.
I think the memo was pretty straightforward.
Short, sweet, and to the point.
I have a
Yeah.
clarifying question.
Okay.
So the memo indicates we're no longer offering the smaller cart option, but we do have the trade-in fee. Am I correctly understanding that they can't get a small cart anymore, but if they already have one, they could size up? Is that what that?
Correct. Yeah. If they already have one, they can size up. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Any from the public? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor of approving the garbage and recycling cart fee and trade-in as presented would signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed would be no. That's approved as well. That gets us down to item number 9, providing city staff with direction on the option of pursuing a joint fire department with Park Ridge Comptroller.
Yes, I know I presented this in July, and I told you that I'd be looking for a decision on kind of what direction we want to go in September, and so I definitely wanted to follow up on that and sort of close the loop on the idea. Basically, I have gotten some feedback that a little bit more time would be useful, that this is a big change and that it requires a lot of consideration. So I'm okay with spending a little bit more time to, analyze this and basically postponing action. That means that it wouldn't get in place by January 1st of 2026. However, I think that based on where we're at, I think it makes sense to delay, but ultimately it's the decision of the committee in terms of what direction you want to provide staff on this option, and also if you have any other feedback on it or any other questions that have come up, please let me know. So,
I guess I would concur that it's a pretty complicated and hard to explain. I think trying you had a pretty ambitious timeline. I think you said that in your memo. I think that's a pretty good way to describe it. I think this question's better part of valor, and I think just putting it on hold for right now and taking a longer look at it, I think it would be well served. So, committee, what's your wishes?
You need a motion to postpone?
Do you want a motion to postpone, or do you just, if we don't have a motion, I guess then we just don't move? Would you like to have a motion on the record to postpone?
I think it makes sense to have a motion on the record to postpone.
Okay.
Motion to postpone.
Yeah, make a motion to postpone.
Okay, Alder Schutter makes a motion to postpone.
Second.
Second by Alder Morrow. Any other questions or comments? Any from the public?
Jackie Guthrie, District 2. It's my understanding that our Police and Fire Commission have not voiced support or taken a vote to support this move, which would essentially eliminate their oversight as a board of the fire department. Am I understanding that correctly?
So we had 2 meetings with the Police and Fire Commission, which were more informational, but you're correct that they have not taken a vote to recommend approval, denial, or, postponement.
And it would necessitate, if we did move in this direction, creating a separate, possibly equal, but being the same people could be appointed to it, but a separate body to oversee the fire department. Am I correct in that?
Yes, you're correct that it would be a joint fire commission, and you'd have basically a board of police commissioners, and then you'd have a joint fire commission.
Right. So they would still maintain the same duties over police. It would be just the fire portion where there'd be a separate board.
Right. And I bring this up because if this body is to vote to postpone, what I would hate for anyone to get the impression of is that this was simply presented too soon or too quickly, and a request for an answer happened too quickly, and this will be a plan for our financial future as of January of 2027. I wanted to take the opportunity to go on the record saying that I think the Police and Fire Commission are doing a really good job of overseeing both of those workforces in their service to our community. I worry about moving towards short-term financial gains and eliminating their oversight of one of the 2 work areas of emergency response within our city and creating 2 different boards. Even if they're sat by similar people, I have philosophical concerns for the relatively low monetary response. I would love to see our community look at raising fees for services, and the staff and the mayor giving city council a list of the buildings that we own so that we can do some analysis of what might be discontinued or moved off of the rolls before we look at finding a loophole and leveraging it to put more burden on property tax owners in our city. I think they already pay a disproportionate amount of the cost of doing business, and I will not be in favor of this even if the vote is delayed and moved to council in a few months from now, short of PFC helping us find a reason to think that it's a good idea. Thanks for entertaining the comment.
Mary Kneebone, District 7, Alder. Consumer Price Index plus 2% is what this autonomous body, if this thing is developed, will have the ability to levy on our taxes. So as inflation goes up, CPI goes up. So if inflation rate is 5%, that could be a 7% levy on the property taxes that no one except that body controls. There's no oversight by the council on this district. I think it's a great idea to postpone this. I would think it would take at least a year to figure out if this is something we want to do. At this point, Park Ridge brings nothing to the equation except money. They don't bring equipment, they don't bring personnel, they don't bring buildings. We would get that if we could include Hull or Stockton or Village of Plover, Town of Plover, whatever. We'd get a lot more bang for the buck. But what ultimately concerns me the most is this autonomous body having the ability to raise taxes on those of us with fixed incomes in light of all the borrowing we're going to have to do and the major projects coming forward. I just can't see how we can put this on the taxpayers, as Alder Guthrie mentioned. But I think it's worth exploring, but I think it's going to take some time. I know something in the Wausau area has worked very well. But if we can't spread the pain around, I just don't see how we can put this on our taxpayers. So, I think you're doing the right thing to postpone and take the time to really explore all the ramifications and then bring something maybe in 6 or 8 months, however long it takes. So, thanks.
I have a question.
Okay. Broderick.
So it does seem to me like there has been quite a lot of pushback on this proposal. I feel like we have heard from a lot of different voices that people are hesitant, skeptical. It really seems like a lot of change in a short amount of time. So I guess my question is, if we are postponing tonight, could you give some examples of what sorts of questions we would be trying to answer in the meantime? What are we looking to discover that may change what feels like the general consensus, which is that this seems like too great of a change for too little benefit, when ultimately, if we're trying to exceed the levy limit, it seems like we have simpler vehicles to try and do that.
Mm-hmm. Sure, and one of the things that I hope comes out of the financial management plan that we discussed earlier is sort of a plan for the operating budget, and I think that might give a lot of insight into what we have to do going forward, and as far as if there are, other options that are more feasible or more acceptable to people. So I think that's one aspect. As far as some of the other details to look at, a lot of work can still be done in terms of talking to other joint fire departments in terms of how they have certain things set up, in terms of, so if we're gonna, look at this seriously, I know that the fire chief had some questions in terms of how some certain things would work in terms of insurance and things like that. So I think there's some work to be done in that area as well, if we even, I guess, get to that point.
I have a question. My understanding, finance is the one area where the PFC doesn't have control. That still lies within the Finance Committee and the Council. Would the new entity created actually be able to set a levy, or would they just be recommending a levy amount to us to approve? Who has the final decision on that, if that type of a setup would actually be implemented?
So they would be recommending a budget, and then the budget would be adopted by both governing bodies, is typically how it would work in the intergovernmental agreement.
So they couldn't unilaterally increase it, it would have to be approved by both of their village board and by our council?
Yeah.
They would not be the levying entity?
Correct, yeah, because it would be city tax levy, and then basically we would get, both governing bodies would adopt the budget. Both governing bodies would have to pass the resolution to exceed the levy limits for the purposes of the joint fire department, and then basically the joint fire department would send a bill to both municipalities to pay their share of that budget.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how it would work.
It's complicated. That's why I think we need to, yeah. All right, so the motion is on the floor to postpone this and gathering more information. All in favor of that postponement would indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and opposed would be no. So that is being postponed. We have approval of claims paid, item number 10. Any large, I saw there's some big ticket items that you may want to highlight.
Yep, absolutely. So we had our August tax settlement payments. So basically, we collect taxes for all the different taxing jurisdictions, the school district, the county, the tech college, and then we forward their portion of your taxes on to those different bodies. So there's some fairly large payments for that. And then also in August is when we make our payments for development incentive expenses. So you have the pay-as-you-go style development incentives that were paid out in August. And then you also had some large capital projects, which we always tend to have. And then you had the second quarter room tax revenue. Of all the room tax revenue that we collect, 46.86% gets forwarded to the Stevens Point Area Convention and Visitors Bureau. So you'll also notice a large payment to them for their share of the room tax collections.
What's the brewery payment for?
The brewery payment is related to a special assessment that we did with the brewery, and it was related to the utility department, and it's related to
wastewater treatment?
Yeah, it's related to wastewater. They have a dedicated high-strength waste line that goes directly from the brewery to the wastewater treatment plant. So, and then basically what we did is the utility department paid for it, and then had an agreement with the brewery in terms of special assessing the brewery over a period of, I think it was 10 years, to recover that capital investment in the high-strength waste line.
Yeah, I thought it was over, so I was surprised to see it again.
Any other questions from the committee? Comments? Any from the public? Hearing none, a motion for approval of claims paid would be in order.
So moved.
We have a motion by Alder Morrow. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Alder Broderick. All in favor of approving those claims paid as presented signify by saying aye. Aye. And opposed would be no. And so that passes unanimously. That brings us to item number 11. We will be looking at adjourning to go into closed session. It's set at approximately 7 p.m. I guess we missed that one. Pursuant to Wisconsin Statutes 19.85(1)(e), deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session on the following: negotiating potential development agreements in TIF District Number 10. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
Motion to go into closed session.
Alder Morrow makes that motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Alder Keemer. That's a roll call.
Morrow?
Aye.
Shuda?
Aye.
Hemer?
Aye.
Broderick? Aye. Christensen?
Aye.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.